the next phase, we're going to do talk about folks and their connections to the Little Salmon. And we're asking folks to share like what's your connection to the river watershed, maybe the organization or what you represent, and then why the water quality is important to you or what concerns you might have. Where we're going to hear from folks about what's important to them about the watershed. Great. It seems like I want to go back to Dean Dryden. Dean, I've got a note from Rebecca that you were able to get your speaker set. So I just want to make sure we gave you time to chat. You were going to say something earlier. Are you still there, Dean?
Yeah, I'm trying. Can you hear me now?
We can. That's great.
Good, good. I have a question, and actually the video kind of brings it up too. I want to know how the collaborative is different from other local and state and federal groups that have also been working on conservation area efforts in this area. Clear back in 2000, clear up until 2008, we had TMDLs and WAG meetings, and I don't know what this group is going to do any different than those did.
I want to go to Wes, just because when you wrote the grant that came in from the BLM, maybe share a little bit of your perspective. Like why take there's a lot of effort the BLM, the Bureau of Reclamation. Like, why did you write the grant? What were you hoping for?
Yeah, Dean brings up a great point. You know, there was a watershed advisory group that was in place and then did some great work. And I've looked over the report, and I'm not looking to replicate from ground zero to get to the same answers they did. I want to use, and one of the discussions I'm hoping we can have is that folks from that watershed advisory group can inform us of where they left off. And we know that we still have water quality issues. The problem has not been solved. And so I don't look at it as starting from scratch and doing the same thing. I'm hoping we can learn from the work that's been done in the past and further it. And so the difference between folks that are, you know, maybe individually working, like you might have DEQ working on one project and Idaho Fish and Game working on a project, and the Nez Perce tribe comes down and does a little individual project. That's all great, but we're missing the collaborative effort of like learning from one another and reaching out and hearing each other's voices and trying to figure out better ways to do things. And so because there is more progress to be made, rather than just kind of look at what's been done in the past, I was hoping to get this collaborative group together to build on the Watershed Advisory Group's recommendations to see if, you know, if there's more that can be done and new players at the table and try to further that discussion.
Can I go on?
Of course.
Oh, sure, Dean. Go ahead.
Well, here's a concern that I have. In your proposal for this grant, you talked about water quality. It states in there that undoubtedly you think that we have too many cattle in the valley. You're stating about E. coli, water temperature, not in a very favorable view. I guess what I'm wondering is, so what do you want to do that would impact my way of life and living?
Yeah, Dean, just for clarification, and we can look over that grant together. I don't ever remember, there's no spot of that where I said there's too many cattle on the land. This is private property.
No, it said overgrazing.
As an issue. Okay. Yeah. I mean, so I think there's certain spots in that area that there are levels of grazing that we're saying, hey, is there ways? And I don't have the solutions to all this. And this is where I want to get together with folks and throw out ideas, you know, and say, hey, is there ways where you had, you know, potentially, and this is where I want to show folks that there's potential wins, and not everyone, If someone doesn't want to be on board, this is the nice thing on private property. No one has to be on board. You know, they can continue to run their land how they've run it for the last 100 years. For folks that maybe want to try something different, some of the ideas that we've seen, kind of like on that Trout Creek, is just keeping cattle outside of the riparian areas, and then seeing if those riparian areas again can cool water, provide more fish habitat. And again, if folks are interested, you know, there's potential funding to do some of that. If folks aren't interested, then they have every right to run their property however they see fit.
Dean, did that answer your question or get the conversation started?
It brings up a lot more questions, I guess.
Okay.
And to be honest with you, I know of at least 5 of, I can say 5, that we've already, I started fencing off our riparian areas 20 years ago. Matter of fact, I've said this to other people, but you haven't heard it. That when I first heard about this Nez Perce Collaborative, I was down working on my riparian fences, and I'm going, what the heck? What are these people doing? And to me, it looks like you're trying to reinvent the wheel. I mean, most people in our area, through the TMDLs and the WAG, have already started doing these or are very aware of it. And I'm not sure what this is for.
So Dean, just a suggestion, if folks do want, you know, it takes a long time, as you know, to heal up riparian areas, and it takes resources and it takes a lot of hands and a lot of time and effort. And I've seen Idaho Fish and Game, Michael Young and Mary Dudley, maybe you've worked with them over years in the past, but had some pretty good results in certain areas. And so what we can bring to the table, and again, this is the discussion, if this is decided of at the end of this collaborative, that if someone like yourself said, hey, do you have resources to help plant? Do you have bodies to help plant? Do you have the ability to help? If that was something you're interested in, I could say yes. And if it's not something you're interested, that's okay. But those are some of the things that we could bring to the table.
This is Commissioner Purdy. Can you hear me?
Hi, Vicki. Yes, we can. Or Commissioner.
Hi. Well, just a couple things I'd like to bring up regarding Dean's comments. So we have a ranch up there as well and have done significant work on it over the years to address any riparian concerns. And in addition to that, there's a lot less cattle up there now than there were, say, 10, 20 years ago. I think people are using much better grazing habits than they ever have before. And we love the land and we love the water. All ranchers do. So the overgrazing comment, it was a little bit distressing. So I think some of the things in there are concerning. And a thing that is concerning to me is the same comment was made on logging and overlogging, and to me, the biggest problem we have in our area with the watersheds is the lack of forest management. The forest has been managed terribly over the last about 30 or 40 years. We've got more prescribed burns than ever, and instead of prescribed burns, logging and literally cleaning up. We don't burn our ranches up. We get out there with shovels and clean our ditches, whatever we need to do, but we don't set fires very often unless we need to. But it just seems like there needs to be a lot more logging and cleaning up so that the water can actually get to the watershed. You'll have more that way. So those are concerns of mine. Instead of conservation in the way that you don't do anything and use the land at all, it seems to me like we would be better off to start using it and taking care of it a lot better.
Thank you, Commissioner. So Wes, it's my understanding, and it's coming on as a facilitator, that the goal of this kind of 2-year process would be to put all solutions on the table. And, you know, whatever recommendations the collaborative has, those are the recommendations of the collaborative.
Yes.
That's clear. I mean, that's what my understanding. Is that clear to you, when your intention of writing the grant?
Yeah. The grant, the purpose of the grant is to hear these voices, what Vicki brings up, what
One of
Dean
them for IBOL, the other one's for the
One second.
sorry about that. Yeah, it's really to get a group voice and say, like Vicki, you know, brought up, you know, some of the, you know, the what's going on in forest management. You know, I think there's solutions here where I don't think anyone's trying to say don't use this land or don't graze cattle on it or things like that. It's finding creative ways where we can make things better with a lot of voices coming into that conversation.
Well, again, to address Dean's comments, we've got a $100,000 grant here, just spending more federal money for another water project that would be nice if we could get some logging done. And I mean, we continually get sued. We've got the Forest Collaborative up there who puts together puts together one project after another to address a lot of these same concerns. And we're not getting anywhere with those because environmental groups come in and sue us and stop it. So I think that's just where Dean's coming from. It's where I'm coming from. Our resources aren't being managed. And I don't think the ranchers are the problem. I think the forest management is the problem. And to address that would be fantastic. As far as the water goes and the temperature, we've got Fish and Game's got plenty of water up there that they're not putting down the river. And I understand why, but then we've also got hot springs all along that river that are also, you know, an issue. And I don't know that anybody really wants to get rid of the hot springs either. So I just wonder if we're not barking up the wrong tree and not addressing the wrong problems.
Excellent, thank you. And I think, again, my understanding as we move forward, we'll have an opportunity to explore all these issues. And the group can take us where we want to go. So if it's, you know, yeah, again, like that's hopefully the way this will work best is if we get more voices, we get more input, and we can keep looking into what we need to look into. Dean, were you able to voice what you wanted to voice?
I do have another question for you. It was mentioned in there about the falls as being an impediment for the andromedous fish. And as I understood it, they were wanting to do some modification to it. Is that correct?
Dean, I can answer that. Yeah, so those fish passage barriers, like we kind of talked about earlier in the discussion, have been there probably since the 30s. You know, right now, if you invited fish up, let's say you modified those falls and invited fish up, the temperatures for at least Chinook right now are too warm. It would probably be lethal for the fish. And so I think that would be, you know, at some point, would that be amazing to have, you know, not everyone agree maybe, but I would think having some of these fish being able to get back to the traditional spawning grounds would be great. But I think we're a long ways from that. A lot, you know, water temperature and water quality and some of that has to be addressed before you'd invite fish back up in that area.
Well, and I'll go on with this a little bit because I was reading your grant proposal, and the solutions that you proposed were for the water quality and was quantity. And the only way you're going to get more water is to take it from me. Vicki did talk about the Fish and Game. They do have 500 acre feet in Brundage Reservoir, that was a condition for us to rebuild it in the 80s. And they could use that water in stream flow. But, you know, there's a lot of negatives that I see on this that will impact me if you try to remove those falls, because it's been talked about several times. And you get me on the defense a little bit on this because, for one thing, there are no genetic stock of fish that would come up into our valley and on up. If there ever were any, they've been gone for 100 years. And if you're going to try to bring in species, you're going to have to cool the water down by putting more water down the streams. Therefore, that means that you're going to be having to take it away from the private property owners that irrigate with that water. I'm not in favor of that, guys.
Sure. Dean, I really appreciate you and the commissioner sharing. And then I appreciate you too being willing, the first one to go. A lot of these collaboratives, sometimes there's like an elephant in the room. People kind of dance around for a little bit, and it takes a few meetings to get there. So I appreciate you sharing your concerns and talking about what's important to you. I think that has there's a lot of value in that. And it's important that we all be able to do that. We're going to ask Marcy Carter from the Nez Perce Tribe if you'd be willing to go next.
Sure. I'll be the elephant here. So my name is Marcy Carter. Can you hear me okay, everyone?
We can, Marcy. Thank you.
Okay. So I am just going to give just a short little perspective from the tribe's perspective. Originally, our people occupied, a huge, vast land that incorporated Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. And then we also had rights outside of that area where we hunted, fished, and gathered. The Little Salmon is part of our homeland. That area has been established through the Treaty of 1855, where our people negotiated for the retention of our inherent rights to that area. From a tribal perspective, we are looking for I guess the ability to manage our resources, with the people of Idaho, and to restore those resources as well as we can back to their original state. And right now, our fish are in a dreadful state. Fish did get up those falls. We had villages up in that valley, all the way down, all the way down the Long Valley and into the Salmon River Mountains. We have that knowledge, that historic knowledge that our people had villages. We have names for those areas. And so we would like to have, fish back into those areas so that our people can continue to exercise our rights in harvesting resources in the area. I guess from that perspective, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Sure. And thank you, Marcy. Thanks for going next on that. We're, you know, as we move forward, again, like the more folks we can hear from, the more perspectives we can bring into the collaborative. And so, yeah, I appreciate you going first or next. Next on the list, Craig Utter. Craig, are you willing to go? This is Craig Utter of the Payette Land Trust.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. The Payette Land Trust, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're an organization that works to conserve the rural heritage of the West Central Mountains of Idaho. We mainly work with private landowners who want to forward their conservation ethic. And what I think is very important in this discussion is that the Land Trust does work a lot with agricultural entities, farming and ranching. That's my background as an agriculturalist and a former rancher, beef cattle producer. I understand the importance of working within watersheds collaboratively to not only keep that agricultural heritage alive, but the resource heritage alive as well, and working together, and have had some pretty good success over the years in seeing that play out to where all entities involved really do benefit. So I'm excited about the Little Salmon Watershed. We work in 4 counties, Valley, Adams, Idaho, and Washington, on a wide range of private land conservation easements to meet these same kind of objectives. And we have currently the Payette River Basin Initiative in place for the Payette River. And when Wes reached out to us about the Little Salmon, that fit right in with our ideology of working with the private landowners on the valley floor to look at ways to keep those agricultural properties from converting to development, and also finding ways of working with those private landowners for restoration through conservation easements that can not only help the valley ecosystem, but the agricultural entities that are there as well. So we're really excited to be a part of this. We have a few easements on the river, both in the New Meadows area and then all the way down towards Riggins. So, and have been approached by many other folks within this region. So I hope we can be a resource to answer questions for the agriculturalists as well as the conservationists. So we're here to help, and hopefully we can find other projects that meet everybody's goals.
Thank you, Craig. Stacy LaFay, Stacy, would you be willing to share next, again, a little bit about your background and your connection with the watershed?
I'm trying to unmute myself here. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. We hear you loud and clear.
Dean knows me very well. We grew up together. We've got property that are adjacent to one another, and I have a long history of living in Meadows Valley. Our family has. We homesteaded in the 1880s, and successive generations have spent a lot of time on Goose Creek. Primarily, that's primarily where the property that our family has is adjacent to. As a child growing up, I spent a lot of time fishing in Goose Creek from spring, summer, and fall. And I remember, being able to fish for whitefish in the fall below the cemetery road bridge down there in a great big hole by a cottonwood tree. And, that hasn't happened in 20 years. There's no water down there anymore for the whitefish to even come up into Goose Creek. And I've seen, the water quality down through that part of the valley fade. I used to catch lots of brook trout above the bridge there on Cemetery Road. Fished all the way up through Dean's property, through Daryl's property, or the Clay property, all the way up through there, and all times of year. And I remember trout in the ditches. And I remember with my great uncle Ed Wilson going down and fishing in the ditch behind the big barn on my aunt's side of the deal. I'd like to be a part of coming together with a solution on how to bring some of that back. Our family has a long history in the valley, and I'd like to see some positive changes with respect to water quality. My background is I'm a lifelong resident of Meadows Valley. I spent a lot of time down Valley at Boise State. I'm graduated from there with a bachelor's degree in electronics engineering. I currently run the city of McCall's water treatment plant. So I'm very familiar with water quality, TMDLs, for water and wastewater, because I ran both of their water and wastewater systems. So I do know what degraded water quality looks like, because I have to deal with that all the time with DEQ and EPA. So that's kind of my background.
Awesome. Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for sharing. Lee Bailey, are you available?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me and see me?
We can. Thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks, Gary, and thanks for the opportunity to be here today. I really appreciate it. I've been around the Payette most of my career as a hydrologist, and I have spent actually about 15 years down at the New Meadows Ranger District as a hydrologist down there. So that's probably my biggest connection to the subbasin. I've been down there analyzing projects for the Forest Service that we proposed in the subbasin. Been driving around and hiking the Forest Service land in the subbasin. So I'm pretty familiar with the various tributaries that come off the forest lands, and I'm acquainted with how past management actions have affected our watershed conditions out there on the forest land. So my goal has basically been to try to fit in restoration actions into the work that we do, apply those best management practices to what we're doing, whether it's logging or grazing or whatever. And why is a little salmon important to me? Well, like I say, I've been down there for a while working in the basin. And one thing that, I think we all notice is as we're driving down Highway 95 towards Riggins, that is the most amazing wetland complex along that highway. And that is just such a unique thing about this subbasin. And to think that, maybe 1,000 years ago, it was even larger, and we actually drained some of those lands in the upper part of the subbasin to produce these incredibly productive ag lands that we have now. But it is really unique in that wetland complex. So there's, I think, a lot of opportunity there in that wetland complex to just improve the fisheries and to improve the health of those wetlands. Especially, holding water later in the season is just so important as things get hotter and drier. So that's why I drive down to the Meadows Valley often to buy my hay for my horses, because it's so productive. Just a couple things to add. And let's see, I was a part of that WAG years ago. And I was kind of interested in what Dean Dryden said about this, his question about why we're not organized, at least partially, or working in concert with IDEQ, Clean Water Act adds an updated, to update our TMDL, and also to implement that implementation plan under that TMDL, which I believe is just the upper part of the legislation. I guess that's kind of been a question for me, why we just don't kind of use that terminology and use that structure. And is that possible? So maybe IDEQ can answer that for us. Just another quick concern that comes to mind. I know that the bridge over there by the Forest Service office in New Meadows is being replaced. One of the concerns, I think, in the main Little Salmon corridor is the flooding that takes place in the city. And there are some issues regarding that bridge and some of the land use around there. So that's something that you guys might, I don't know, encompass. Not sure if anybody around would be interested in talking about that. But boy, that's a real issue for the city. And I am just interested in what kind of new structure is going on there. So that's a little bit of a concern along the main stem there. Of course, the Forest Service has already recognized several drainages that are of big importance. Rapid River, Hazard Creek and Hard Creek, Boulder Creek and Trail Creek. These are our priority watersheds for fish. We've been working quite a bit in Boulder Creek lately with a lot of road surveys. And we do have, I've been working with Wes on this a bit. We do have kind of something ready to put in place there. Unfortunately, we did get, it was part of that great big landscape restoration project that did fail due to a lawsuit. But that is something that I'm right now trying to settle. And I'm happy to talk to you about that. We have made just a little bit of, done a little bit of work in there, a few AOPs, aquatic organism passage replacements done, but we still have quite a bit of work in Boulder Creek to do. So that's what I'm working on right now. And I'll pass to the next person.
Phil, you had a question you put in the chat. To me, do you mind just again, like talking about your connection and your question?
Yes. So my name's Phil Obendorf. We just purchased the Ed Rainey property in February. So it's our first summer up there in New Meadows. We farm down here in Parma and Wilder area. And my question for the collaboration is, would there be any grant money for irrigation projects to improve the water quality through pivot irrigation, or more of like a flood intense irrigation where we don't let the water return back to the creek? So that's my question. We have a lot of different, lot of experience with different kinds of irrigation down here in Parma and Wilder. We have a lot of drip irrigation, and we also have some pivots. So that was kind of my question.
Hey, Phil, this is Wes Keller. So we've been really, sorry, let me turn my video back on here. We've been really successful in obtaining grants, not just for forming this collaborative, but for conservation easements. We're kind of new to the water protection, like kind of grants, but I know they're out there. And this is something that I'm glad that, you know, you're asking these kind of questions. This is something that we want to get a list and look into, and would be, you know, willing to actively pursue to see if there are creative solutions where the same amount of water, you know, or less amount of water could be used to get the same productivity. Maybe some things that you have experience with, you know, from past projects, and saying, hey, is there ways to again get the same productivity of the land with less water? And if those solutions exist, I can, you know, try my best to pursue any kind of avenues to see what we could get for grant funding for that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, thanks for answering that question. I think there's definitely some potential for pivots, at least. Seems like those would be the right type of irrigation for that area up there. And I think we'd be able to conserve water that way.
And that would be great, Phil, at some point, like we're talking field trips down the road. You know, I don't begin to have the first, you know, as far as irrigation systems, pros and cons, I'm a newbie. So this would be great to get out on the ground and learn from you guys on some solutions.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Phil. Thanks, Wes. Holly Becker, let's go to you. I see your hand is raised.
Yes, thanks. There has been quite a bit of work done on water system improvement, drains, head gates, irrigation systems in the Stanley area, also the whole Silver Creek trophy fisheries over in that area. That was a huge collaborative project that involved many improvements to irrigation systems, to irrigation head gates, etc. And just recently, Outdoor Idaho had a program where they were talking about improvements to, I believe it was the South Fork of the Snake over in eastern Idaho, and improving the fisheries there by working on headgate improvement or upgrades, new systems that were more favorable to fish, but they also produced, you know, they got a lot more water out of their systems than they had been getting. So just wanted to throw that comment in there. Thanks.
Excellent. Thank you, Holly. You said that was on Outdoor Idaho?
It was, yeah.
I'll try and track that down. Thank you. All right, please go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, thanks. Some of you may know me, most of you probably do not, but I've been working now as a fish biologist in the Pacific Northwest for about 30 years, last 21 of which I've been working here with NOAA and work pretty closely with the Nez Perce Tribe, Fish and Wildlife Service, the Payette National Forest. And so pretty familiar with the watershed. And just so folks know, from what we do at NOAA, our mission is really to protect and restore ESA listed anadromous fish species. So Endangered Species Act listed anadromous fish species. So that's the spring summer Chinook salmon and the steelhead that occur within the Little Salmon River basin. And so to restore these important fish species, we're really looking to protect and restore as much of their native habitat as possible. And this is just a good opportunity. Generally, we tend to work mainly with federal partners, and these collaboratives really give us a chance to reach out and work with the private folks as well, with you landowners. And in general, I think we're just excited to try and see if we can reach some consensus, try and find some common goals to improve water quality overall in the watershed. And we're going to be looking forward to seeing if we can come up with some things we can do out there in the watershed that not only benefit the fish, but also help keep you landowners whole as well. We're not looking to really put you in difficult situation. We're just looking for some common projects that help us both achieve kind of what we're trying to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Bill. Randy, let's go to you. And then if anybody else wants to go, I'll call on you, but then we'll be heading to lunch after that. So Randy, go ahead.
Great. Thank you, Gary. Randy Fox with the Idaho Conservation League. We just recently opened our West Central Idaho office based here in McCall. And from that opening, Wes was kind enough to invite me and therefore ICL into this collaborative. ICL has a long history of working with coalitions and various groups to address issues such as what we're dealing with here, improving water quality in a watershed. We've worked on in the Owyhees and in the Passamaroy watershed and in the Upper Blackfoot Confluence area. And I'm looking forward to this and finding paths that help, as Bill mentioned, keep everybody whole, to support our local economies, as well as benefit the natural ecosystem and the fisheries. And the Little Salmon watershed is becoming important to me as well, because as my wife and I just relocated here, we have found our new home in Meadows and in this watershed, and it's going to become dear to my heart as well. And thank you for having me join and inviting me to participate.
Thank you, Randy.